BQuanchi here, and today I'm going to discuss and review a game that mashes up the action of a fighting game with the strategy of chess, that game being Checkmate Showdown. Before I go on, I wanted to say the best way to support me in the channel is to like, comment, and subscribe. I also game on Twitch, and let me know in the comments what games I should play, cover, and review. Before its actual release, I did play a good amount of the beta and demo versions of Checkmate Showdown, and I'll include a link to the stream VOD of me playing it in the description. Even though most of my experience and opinions of the game were formed when playing the prior version, I did make sure to pick up and play the final release version as well. With the gameplay of Checkmate Showdown, it's pretty straightforward. You play a typical game of chess, but the big difference is that when you take a piece, it starts a fight. Besides the fighting aspect, it does stay true to the rules of chess, such as how pieces move, and elements such as promoting a pawn piece. One thing that's worth noting is that with the pawns, they don't actually fight, and play more like a standard game of chess. So if you take a pawn piece, you defeat it without a fight, and vice versa. It's important to think about the moves you make, since a pawn can even take down a king and win the game without a fight. As I mentioned before, Checkmate Showdown stays true to the game of chess, so the main goal is to take down your opponent's king. So even though being skilled in a game of chess is part of it, the other part is being skilled in fighting games. Besides the pawn pieces, whenever a piece attempts to take another, it engages in a fight. What makes this even more interesting is that it's not so much about the chess move itself, but also the outcome of the fight. So if an opponent tries to take your piece, you can defend yourself and even take their piece instead. With the fighting gameplay, it does feel pretty good as a fighter. It has elements of what you would expect, such as different inputs, combo breakers, throws, special moves, and ultimate attacks. The roster of fighters do have their own styles, but play pretty similar, which I can appreciate since you're constantly changing your fighter based on your moves or your opponent's moves, so it makes it easier to adapt. Moves are pretty easy to pull off, so it does help make things less complicated, especially with back-to-back fights and ever-changing characters. Other game mechanics with the fights are the gauges or cooldowns for the special moves that do fill up over time, so you can't just spam special attacks over and over again. At times, you can even perform a tag assist move, which also has its own meter. In order to have an assist for a fight, you must have a nearby piece that can move to the same space on the board where the fight is taking place, based on the rules and movements of chess. This applies to both fighters, so it does add a layer of strategy with moving your piece to take out another or defend your own piece. Another aspect is a health gauge for each fighter, which is broken down into segments. After a fight, whatever damage is inflicted to the winner will remain, so using the same piece for fight after fight will definitely take its toll. One last aspect with the fighting is performing ultimate attacks. This is where the chess part plays more into the game since only the piece that initiates the fight can perform an ultimate attack. So if you are the fighter on the defending side, you aren't able to execute an ultimate attack for that round. Something that confuses me with these ultimate attacks is that sometimes you can only perform it once, and sometimes you can perform it twice after some time to recharge. I'm not sure why this actually happens. So that pretty much sums up the gameplay and mechanics, and another thing to note are the different modes to play in Checkmate Showdown. It is typical with what you would expect with having online matches that include quick or rank matches, as well as offline modes for local multiplayer or against a computer opponent. Going over the positives, I really enjoy Checkmate Showdown and it does a great job combining the aspects of a fighting game with chess. It does add layers of strategy with being skilled in two types of games that are very different. While the fighting game aspect is somewhat simple, I think that it works well, especially with constantly adapting to different fighters. I also feel that this helps to prevent huge skill gaps between players since it's not filled with complicated combos or large movesets. Of course, there can be times where your online opponent can be much better than you at fighting games, but with the game's design, it can help make things feel a little more even and less unfair. I also really love the overall design and visual presentation of Checkmate Showdown. It definitely drew me towards this title, and I feel like it's a very cool adaptation of the game of chess. It can be very fun and addictive to play a series of back-to-back fights, as well as planning out your next chess moves, and since these existing mechanics are familiar, it is easy to pick up and play. Now on to some of the negatives I have with Checkmate Showdown. My biggest complaint about the game is that it really doesn't reward the player for being good at chess. There is the advantage that if you initiate a fight, you can perform an ultimate attack, but if it can really only perform it once, and with a chance of missing, it's not really that much of an advantage. It feels like being skilled at the game of chess doesn't help that much in a match compared to being good at fighting games. A player can make really dumb or reckless chess moves, but as long as they win every fight, they can easily win the match. Why play the game of chess strategically when you can brute force your way to take out your opponent's king? I do feel like with the gameplay, there's not too much of an unfair skill gap, but it definitely feels like it leans more on the fighting game aspect, and the chess playing takes a back seat. I feel that Checkmate Showdown could have added mechanics to play more into the chess side of things, and give incentives for making well, thought out moves. Some things I thought to include is to possibly give a stat boost when initiating or winning a fight, or gaining health whenever you take out an opponent's pawn. Maybe having something like the king piece starts with much higher stats in the beginning, but it will decrease over time as other chess pieces are taken out. Think of it like a morale system in that the more pieces your opponent has, the stronger the king is as a fighter. So you can try to force your way to the king for a quick victory, but then you risk the disadvantage of fighting against a buffed up fighter. I think these ideas would definitely make matches a lot more interesting, since it would allow more rewards for being good at the game of chess. This could also be implemented as an optional rule set, and would definitely add more layers and strategy to the game. As for the fighting game aspect, I do think it's pretty good, but it's definitely far from being the best. I think with the fighting being somewhat more simple, it helps make the game more approachable, but it does feel lacking compared to other fighters. Maybe it's a little unfair to compare an indie game with a smaller team to bigger and more successful titles, but I do feel that Checkmate Showdown is still a pretty good fighter. If I'm honest, with its unique mashup of genres, I'd rather play Checkmate Showdown compared to other fighting games, but if I'm looking to strictly play a fighting game, I'd rather play something else. Another thing I wanted to mention is the player base, which plays a big part when it comes to games that rely more on online matches and multiplayer. I remember when playing the beta prior to its release, I was able to easily find online matches with other players. However, when I played the released version, I had a much more difficult time finding an online match. Maybe I didn't give it much of a chance or need to research peak times to play the game, such as looking on social media or the game's Discord server. I feel it's a bit of a shame that the player base had possibly dropped off. There's always offline modes to play, although they do rely on having a physical second player or a computer opponent. I would say in my experience with a computer opponent, I found it to be very easy and wish there were more harder difficulties, especially since it's something I can actually play when I can't find an online match. I've also seen in-game announcements of tournaments with prizes, so hopefully it can drum up more interest in the game. One last suggestion that I have is possibly adding just a simple chess mode without the fighting. I'm not sure if it would be worth it for hosting this mode online on top of the main game, so maybe just include it for offline play. Even though I do have some criticisms and suggestions for the game, I really enjoy it and would like to see it succeed. I think it's a great concept and really fun to play. Although it may not be the best fighter out there, it's still a pretty good one. With adding the mechanics and rules of chess, it does help make it very unique, but I feel like it should have done a lot more with the gameplay to reward the player for doing well in the chess aspect. That being said, I do recommend Checkmate Showdown. It's a really fun time, however one of the biggest drawbacks is a possible lack of an active player base. I hope that maybe this game will catch on more, and with its unique concept, it can have a strong place in the very competitive world of online gaming. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Checkmate Showdown, and also let me know what games I should cover in the future. Thanks for watching and have a great day.